The December wind slicing through Chicago was merciless, but it couldn't compare to the icy grip of absolute poverty. Scarlett stood outside the neon-lit diner, clutching exactly $3 crumpled and her 5-year-old son's freezing hand. Then, the boy whispered the words that brought the city's most dangerous man to a dead halt. The snow had been falling since noon, blanketing the cracked pavements of Chicago's south side in a deceptive layer of pristine white. For most, the first heavy snowfall of the year was a reason for hot cocoa and fireside warmth. For 26-year-old Scarlett O'Connor, it was a death sentence. Her boots, bought 3 winters ago from a thrift store, were leaking freezing slush through worn-out soles. Beside her, her 5-year-old son, Leo, trudged along in a jacket that was 2 sizes too small. He didn't complain. He never complained anymore. And that was what broke Scarlett's heart more than the cold. A child who learns to suffer in silence is a child who has seen too much of the world's cruelty. "Almost there, baby," Scarlett murmured, her lips numb, pulling him closer to her side. Just a few more blocks. Scarlett's reality had shattered exactly 3 months and 12 days ago. Her ex-husband, Brendan Cole, a charismatic but hopelessly corrupt mid-level bookie, had vanished into the wind. He didn't just leave a broken marriage, he left behind a staggering debt. Brendan had embezzled heavily from the wrong people, specifically the loan sharks tied to the city's underground syndicates. When they couldn't find Brendan, they came for his collateral, his wife and child. They had drained her bank accounts, forced her out of her apartment, and left her working double shifts at a laundromat just to afford a weekly motel room that smelled of damp mold and cheap cigarettes. Tonight, she had exactly $3.42 to her name. Tomorrow was payday, but tomorrow felt a lifetime away. They finally pushed through the heavy glass doors of Rizzo's, a 24-hour diner that smelled of burnt coffee and stale grease. It was a haven of warmth. Scarlett quickly guided Leo to a small booth near the back, hoping the weary waitress wouldn't kick them out for under-ordering. At the very back of the diner, shrouded in the dim, flickering light of a failing neon sign, sat a man who did not belong in a place like Rizzo's. Noah Moretti did not blend in. At 32, he was the undisputed head of the Moretti Syndicate, an empire built on blood, concrete, and silence. He wore a tailored charcoal wool coat over a bespoke suit that cost more than the diner itself. His dark, calculating eyes tracked everything from the shadows. Across from him sat his underboss, Carmine, a broad-shouldered man with a scar cutting through his thick beard. They were conducting a quiet post-mortem on a failed shipment at the docks, choosing the diner for its obscurity. Noah was sipping a cup of black coffee, listening to Carmine's low, gravelly voice when the bell above the door jingled, drawing his gaze. He watched the young mother and her son walk in. Noah was a predator by nature and by trade. He noticed details. He saw the way the woman positioned her body between the door and the boy, a subconscious shield. He saw the purple shadows of exhaustion under her striking, hollowed-out cheekbones. He saw the trembling of her ungloved hands as she counted out a pathetic pile of damp coins on the Formica table. "So, we make the hit on the harbour master tomorrow," Carmine murmured, leaning in. Noah raised a single finger, silencing his underboss. Carmine blinked, confused, but snapped his mouth shut. Noah's attention was fixed on the booth 2 rows away. The diner was dead quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator, making the exchange between the mother and son agonizingly clear. "What can I get you, hon?" the waitress asked, looking at Scarlett with a mixture of pity and impatience. Scarlett swallowed hard, pushing the coins toward the edge of the table. Just 1 buttermilk pancake, please. With extra syrup, if you have it. And a glass of tap water." "Just 1? Nothing for you?" the waitress asked. Scarlett forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I had a big lunch. I'm stuffed. This is just for him." The waitress nodded and walked away. Scarlett turned to Leo, smoothing down his unruly brown hair. "You're going to get a big pancake, Leo. Just for you." Leo looked down at the scratched table, his small hands fiddling with a torn paper napkin. He looked up at his mother, his large, intelligent eyes filled with a terrifying, adult-like anxiety. He hadn't eaten since a meager bowl of cereal the previous morning. "Mummy," Leo's small voice trembled, cutting through the silence of the diner like glass. "If we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, raw and devastating. Scarlett squeezed her eyes shut, a rogue tear finally escaping and tracing a hot path down her freezing cheek. "No, baby," she choked out, her voice breaking. "No, I promise you. Mummy will figure it out. We won't starve." In the back booth, Carmine stopped breathing. He looked at his boss, expecting Noah to ignore it. The Moretti family dealt in millions, in human lives, in absolute power. They did not care about the collateral damage of poverty. But Noah was entirely still. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle ticked dangerously. The sound of the boy's voice had violently ripped open a door in Noah's mind that he had kept locked for 20 years. Before the suits, before the blood, before the power, Noah had been a fatherless boy freezing in a Brooklyn tenement, asking his own mother the exact same question. His mother hadn't been able to keep her promise. She had died of pneumonia, leaving him to the wolves of the streets. Noah stared at Scarlett. He saw the fierce, desperate love radiating from her, entirely stripped of dignity, fighting purely for survival. "Carmine," Noah said, his voice a low, lethal baritone that brooked no argument. "Yeah, boss?" "Go to the counter. Order 2 steaks, medium rare, mashed potatoes, soup, the biggest piece of chocolate cake they have, and a pot of hot tea." Carmine frowned. "You hungry, boss?" Noah slowly shifted his dark, predatory gaze from the mother and child to his underboss. "It's not for me. Have it sent to their table. Tell the waitress to say it's on the house." Carmine's eyes widened slightly, but he knew better than to question Noah Moretti. He slid out of the booth. "Consider it done." Noah leaned back into the shadows, his eyes locked on Scarlett O'Connor. He didn't know it yet, but the trajectory of his meticulously organized, violent life had just violently shifted course. He wasn't just observing a desperate mother anymore. He was watching a ghost from his past, and Noah Moretti had a habit of keeping whatever caught his eye. The plate that clattered onto Scarlett's table was not a single buttermilk pancake. It was a massive, steaming ribeye steak, flanked by a mountain of buttery mashed potatoes, thick gravy, and a bowl of rich chicken soup. A separate plate held a towering slice of dark chocolate cake. Scarlett stared at the feast, the aroma hitting her empty stomach so hard it made her physically dizzy. She jerked her head up, looking at the waitress in panic. "Wait, no, there's a mistake," Scarlett said quickly, her hands instinctively shielding the food from Leo, as if she feared they'd be arrested for stealing it. "I only ordered a pancake. I only have $3. I can't pay for this." The waitress offered a gentle, knowing smile and pointed a thumb toward the back of the diner. "You don't have to, sweetheart. It's paid for. Gentleman in the back said it's on the house." Scarlett's blood ran cold. In her world, the world Brendan had dragged her into, nothing was free. A free meal was a bribe, a trap, or a down payment on a debt she would pay with her life or her body. She slowly turned her head, her breath catching in her throat. Sitting in the dimmest corner of the diner was a man staring directly back at her. He wasn't one of the street thugs she was used to avoiding. He emanated a terrifying, quiet authority. His suit was immaculate, his posture relaxed but coiled, like a panther resting in a tree. The heavy gold of his watch caught the low light. When their eyes met, Scarlett felt a jolt of sheer terror. His eyes were impossibly dark, devoid of warmth, analyzing her down to her very marrow. "Mommy?" Leo whispered, looking at the steak with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Can I eat it?" Scarlett looked at her starving son, then back at the man in the shadows. Her maternal instinct screamed at her to take the boy and run, to get out into the snow before this dangerous stranger could claim whatever price he expected. But Leo's stomach let out a loud, hollow growl. She couldn't deny him. She just couldn't. "Okay, baby," she whispered, her voice shaking as she cut a small, tender piece of the meat. "Eat slowly." She watched Leo eat with a ravenous desperation that made her silently curse Brendan Cole to hell. She didn't touch a single bite of the food herself. She sat rigidly, her eyes darting between the front door and the man in the back booth. 15 minutes later, Leo was stuffed, half asleep against the vinyl seat, a smudge of chocolate frosting on his cheek. Scarlett gathered her cheap coat, preparing to slip out quietly. She just needed to get back to the motel and lock the door. "You didn't eat." The voice was smooth, deep, and carried the undeniable weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Scarlett jumped, whirling around. Noah Moretti was standing beside their booth. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders blocking the aisle. The scent of expensive cologne and a faint trace of tobacco rolled off him. I wasn't hungry," Scarlett lied, her chin tilting up in a desperate show of defiance. "Thank you for the food. We're leaving now." "It's 18 degrees outside," Noah noted, his dark eyes flickering to her soaked boots, and then to the bruises on her wrist faded, but still visible from when the loan sharks had grabbed her last week. "You're walking in slush. Where are you headed? That's none of your business, Scarlett said, her voice sharp. She grabbed Leo's hand. Come on, Leo. Noah didn't move. He looked down at the boy. You enjoyed the cake, kid? Leo blinked sleepily, intimidated but curious. Yes, sir. Thank you. My dad used to buy me cake, but he went away. Scarlett's grip tightened painfully on Leo's hand. Leo, stop. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Your dad went away? What's your dad's name, kid? Brendan, Leo said innocently. Brendan Cole. The temperature around them seemed to plummet 10 degrees. Scarlett watched as a terrifying, glacial realization washed over the stranger's handsome face. Noah Moretti froze, his eyes snapping from the boy to Scarlett. Brendan Cole. The rat. The low-level scumbag who had laundered $500,000 of Moretti money and vanished into thin air, embarrassing Noah's entire organization. Noah had men scouring 3 states for Cole. And here, dropped right into his lap by an act of random pity, was Brendan Cole's discarded family. Noah looked at Scarlett with a new, dangerous intensity. He saw the resemblance now the photo his men had brought him of Cole's wife, Scarlett. This shivering, destitute woman was the key to finding his money and exacting his revenge. Brendan Cole, Noah repeated softly, the name tasting like venom on his tongue. He looked at Scarlett. You're Scarlett. Panic seized her chest. He knew her. He knew Brendan. Who are you? She whispered, backing up, pulling Leo behind her legs. Are you with the Rossi family? Look, I don't know where he is. He left us with nothing. I don't have their money. I don't care about the Rossis, Noah said, taking a slow step forward. I care about what belongs to me. Before Scarlett could scream, Noah's gaze shifted to the front window of the diner. His expression darkened. Scarlett followed his eyes. Pulling into the snowy parking lot was a rusted black sedan. 2 massive men in leather jackets stepped out. Scarlett recognized them instantly. It was Mickey and Paulie, the Rossi family's debt collectors, the men who had beaten her landlord to get to her room last week. They had tracked her down. They're here for you, Noah stated, completely unfazed by the arrival of armed muscle. Oh God, Scarlett gasped, genuine terror ripping through her. She scooped Leo into her arms, looking wildly around for a back exit. Please don't let them take me. They'll hurt him. Noah watched her panic. His mind calculated the board in a split second. If the Rossis took her, Brendan Cole would eventually hear about it, and Noah would lose his bait. Plus, looking at the terrified child burying his face in his mother's neck, Noah felt that old, unfamiliar protective rage flare up in his chest. Nobody was touching the kid? Come with me, Noah commanded, stepping into her personal space. What? No, I don't even know you, Scarlett cried. My name is Noah Moretti, he said, and he saw the exact moment she recognized the name. The color drained entirely from her face. The Morettis weren't just loan sharks, they were the apex predators of the city's underworld. You have 2 choices, Scarlett, Noah said, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, lethal whisper as the diner bell jingled and the 2 Rossi thugs walked in. You can stay here and let them drag you out by your hair, or you can walk out the back door with me, get into my car, and I will ensure they never breathe in your direction again. Hey, there she is! Paulie barked from the front of the diner, spotting Scarlett. He reached into his jacket. Scarlett squeezed her eyes shut. She was choosing between a bullet and a cage, but as Leo whimpered against her collarbone, the choice was already made. Take us, she whispered brokenly. Noah's eyes gleamed with a possessive, dark triumph. He placed a heavy, warm hand on the small of her back. Carmine, Noah called out over his shoulder as he steered Scarlett toward the kitchen doors. Carmine stepped out of the shadows, pulling a suppressed pistol from his waistband with terrifying casualness. Yeah, boss. Tell the Rossi boys the woman belongs to me now, Noah said coldly. If they have a problem with it, they can take it up with God. Noah pushed Scarlett and Leo out into the freezing alleyway, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind them just as the first gunshot echoed inside the diner. Waiting in the snow was a sleek, armored black SUV, its engine purring like a waiting beast. Noah opened the door, his dark eyes locking onto hers in the falling snow. Get in, Scarlett. You don't have to starve anymore, but from now on, you answer to me. The Lake Forest estate was a fortress disguised as a masterpiece of modern architecture. Set back on 20 acres of snow-covered pine forests just north of Chicago, Noah Moretti's compound was impenetrable. High iron gates, perimeter cameras, and men in tailored dark suits walking the grounds with discreet earpieces made sure of that. For the first 48 hours, Scarlett felt like she had traded a freezing slum for a golden cage. She woke up on the third morning in a guest suite larger than any apartment she had ever rented. The sheets were high thread count Egyptian cotton, the air smelled of cedar and expensive vanilla, and the floors were heated. But when she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, she saw two of Noah's men standing near the driveway, assault rifles slung casually over their shoulders beneath their heavy coats. "Mommy?" Scarlett turned. Leo was sitting up in the massive king-size bed, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing brand new silk pajamas that Noah's housekeeper, a stoic older woman named Mrs. Gallagher, had provided. For the first time in months, Leo didn't look pale or shivering. The dark circles under his eyes were already fading. "I'm here, baby," Scarlett said softly, rushing over to kiss his forehead. It was warm, healthy. "Are we staying here forever?" Leo asked, looking around the lavish room. "The food man is scary, but his house is nice." Scarlett's heart tightened. The food man. Noah Moretti. She hadn't seen him since he shoved them into his SUV outside Rizzo's diner. He had barked orders to his driver to take them to the estate, while he and Carmine stayed behind to clean up the mess with the Rossi thugs. "We're just, visiting Leo," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "Just until I figure things out." A sharp knock at the mahogany door made her jump. Before she could answer, it swung open. Noah stepped into the room. He looked different in the daylight, though no less terrifying. The bespoke suits were replaced by a dark cashmere sweater and fitted black trousers, emphasizing the brutal, muscular build beneath the refined fabric. He carried a tablet in one hand and a steaming mug of black coffee in the other. His dark eyes swept over the room, pausing on Leo, before locking onto Scarlett. "Mrs. Gallagher made pancakes," Noah said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Real ones. Downstairs in the dining room." Leo's eyes lit up, but he looked to his mother for permission. Scarlett gave a tight, microscopic nod, and the boys scrambled out of bed, running out the door. Noah stepped aside to let him pass, watching the kid with an unreadable expression before stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind him. The heavy click of the lock sent a spike of pure adrenaline through Scarlett's veins. "Sit," Noah commanded. Scarlett stood her ground, crossing her arms defensively. "I preferred to stand." Noah walked slowly toward her, stopping just inches away. He was so close, she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Your husband didn't just steal money, Scarlett. He stole my logistics. He took shipping manifests from my front company, Apex Global Freight, and sold them to Dmitry Volkov." Scarlett gasped. Even civilians in Chicago knew the name Volkov. He was the head of the local Bratva, a Russian syndicate infamous for their absolute lack of mercy. They were the Moretti's biggest rivals. "Brendan isn't a mastermind," Scarlett said, her voice shaking. "He's a degenerate gambler. He wouldn't know how to sell shipping manifests." "He knew enough to broker a deal," Noah countered coldly. "My accountant, Arthur Pendleton, found the leak yesterday. Brendan took $500,000 in cash from my vaults and used the manifests as collateral to get Volkov to smuggle him out of the city. He's hiding under Russian protection." "Why are you telling me this?" Scarlett whispered, terrified of the answer. Noah reached out, his large, calloused hand brushing a stray lock of red hair away from her face. The touch was startlingly gentle, a violent contrast to the man's reputation. Scarlett froze, her breath catching. "Because, Scarlett," Noah murmured, his dark eyes trailing down to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. "Volkov is greedy, but he isn't stupid. He knows I'm tearing the city apart looking for coal. He's going to cut Brendan loose the second he outlives his usefulness. And when Brendan runs out of Russian goodwill, he's going to run out of money. And when a man like that runs out of money, he comes back to the only leverage he has left. Me," she breathed, the horrific realization settling in. "You," Noah confirmed, "and the boy, you are the bait. You live here, you eat my food, you sleep in my beds, and you don't step foot off this property. When Brendan reaches out to you, and you will tell me, I get my money, I get my revenge, and you get your freedom. And if I refuse," she challenged, a spark of stubborn anger flaring in her chest. Noah's expression hardened into a mask of pure, predatory dominance. "Then I put you back on the street, exactly where I found you. And I let the Rossi family finish what they started at the diner." He turned and walked toward the door. "Eat your breakfast, Scarlett." We have a long wait ahead of us. 3 weeks passed. December bled into a bitter, freezing January. The dynamics within the Lake Forest estate began to shift in ways Scarlett never anticipated. Noah Moretti, the ruthless boss of the Chicago underworld, was harboring a glaring weakness, and his name was Leo. It started small. Noah would sit in the massive, mahogany-paneled library, reviewing ledgers and fielding tense phone calls about the Volkov situation. Leo, bored out of his mind, had taken to sitting on the Persian rug near the fireplace, playing with a set of wooden blocks Mrs. Gallagher had dug out of the attic. One evening, Scarlett walked in to fetch her son, only to stop dead in her tracks. Noah was sitting on the floor in his $3,000 suit, silently helping Leo construct a structurally sound tower. Carmine, the terrifying underboss, was standing by the door, trying desperately to suppress a grin. "You need a wider base, kid," Noah grunted, handing Leo a rectangular block. "Otherwise, the whole thing collapses. Structure is everything." Leo took the block seriously, placing it exactly where Noah indicated. "Like a real building?" "Like everything in life," Noah replied, his voice devoid of its usual lethal edge. "You build the foundation strong, nobody can knock it down." Scarlett leaned against the doorframe, her heart doing a strange, painful flutter. She saw the man Noah could have been in another life. She also felt the heavy, undeniable pull of attraction that had been simmering between them. Noah caught her watching him, his eyes locked onto hers, burning with an intensity that made her flush and look away. The air between them was electric, thick with unspoken, dangerous promises. But the illusion of domestic peace shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. Scarlett was doing laundry in the estate's massive utility room. She was sorting through the few meager belongings she had brought from the motel, shaking out Leo's old, worn-out winter coat before tossing it into the wash. As she squeezed the bulky fabric of the collar, something hard crunched under her fingers. She frowned, feeling the inner lining. There was a stiff, rectangular shape sewn awkwardly into the cheap padding. Her blood turned to ice. She grabbed a pair of sewing scissors from the counter and carefully snipped the thread. Out slipped a small, black USB drive, along with a brass safety deposit key from First Trust Bank of Chicago. A piece of folded, grease-stained paper fell out with it. Scarlett dropped the coat and snatched the paper with trembling hands. It was Brendan's sloppy handwriting. "Scar, if you're reading this, I'm in deep. The drive has Volkov's local distribution routes. I stole it from his guys before I ran. The key is to a box with 50 grand. Keep Leo safe. I'll find you when the heat dies down. B." Scarlett stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Brendan hadn't just stolen from Noah, he had stolen from the Bratva. And instead of taking the evidence with him, the coward had sewn it into his 5-year-old son's coat. He had turned his own child into a walking target for the Russian mob. If Volkov's men had caught them on the street, they wouldn't have just beaten her. They would have ripped Leo apart to find this drive. Rage, hotter and more violent than anything she had ever experienced, exploded in her chest. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about hiding it, or running, or using the money. She turned on her heel, gripping the drive and the keys so hard her knuckles turned white, and marched straight to Noah's private office. She didn't bother knocking. She threw the heavy oak doors open. Noah was at his desk, meeting with Arthur Pendleton and 3 capos. They all froze, hands instinctively dropping toward their holstered weapons at the sudden intrusion. "Out!" Noah barked at his men, his eyes never leaving Scarlett's furious, tear-streaked face. "All of you. Now." The men filed out silently, Arthur closing the doors tight. "Scarlett, what is it?" Noah asked, standing up, his tone shifting immediately to high alert. She walked up to his massive desk and slammed the USB drive, the key, and the note down onto the polished mahogany. He put it in Leo's coat. Scarlett choked out, her whole body shaking with a mixture of terror and murderous rage. "He hid Volkov's data in my baby's coat, Noah. He made my son a target." Noah stared at the items on the desk, then read the crumpled note. The temperature in the room plummeted. The look that crossed Noah Moretti's face was not just anger. It was the face of a man ready to burn a city to the ground. The muscles in his jaw locked, and a terrifying, dead calm settled over him. "He used the boy as a mule," Noah whispered, the words dripping with lethal intent. "I didn't know," Scarlett sobbed, finally breaking down, the adrenaline leaving her system. "I swear to God, Noah. I didn't know he had it on him. In a second, Noah was around the desk. He didn't yell. He didn't interrogate her. He pulled her flush against his chest, wrapping his massive arms around her trembling frame. Scarlett buried her face in his neck, clutching the front of his sweater as she cried. Noah rested his chin on the top of her head, his hand fiercely gripping the back of her hair. I know, Noah murmured, his voice rough. I know you didn't, Mia Bella. I've got you. Nobody touches you. Nobody touches the kid. He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, his gaze dropping to her lips. The barrier between captor and captive dissolved entirely. He kissed her hard, desperate, and possessing. Scarlett kissed him back, pouring all her fear and newfound trust into him. It was a chaotic, bruising clash of teeth and breath, cementing a dangerous loyalty between them. When Noah finally pulled away, his eyes were pitch black with resolve. Volkov has been tearing up the south side looking for this drive, Noah said, picking up the black USB. Brendan thinks he can use this to buy his way back into the city. He's going to contact you soon to get that coat. What do we do? Scarlett asked, her voice steadying. She wasn't just bait anymore. She was Noah's partner in this. Noah walked over to his liquor cabinet, pouring 2 fingers of scotch. We don't wait for him to call. We set the trap. We use the safety deposit box. Brendan thinks he has 50 grand waiting for him. I'll make sure he gets exactly what he deserves. Noah picked up his phone and hit a speed dial. Carmine, get the assault teams ready. We're going to First Trust Bank downtown. And call the contacts at the docks. Dmitry Volkov is about to receive a very unpleasant gift. The board was set, the ghosts were coming out of the shadows, and Noah Moretti was preparing for war. The burner phone arrived at the estate 2 days later, smuggled inside a grocery delivery box meant for Mrs. Gallagher. It rang exactly at midnight. Noah stood by the window of Scarlett's bedroom, bathed in the moonlight reflecting off the snow, and gave her a single, definitive nod. Scarlett answered, pressing the cheap plastic to her ear. Scar? Brendan's voice was a frantic, breathless rasp, distorted by static and sheer panic. Scarlett, is that you? Listen to me. I need you to do exactly as I say. Get Leo's winter coat, take a cab to the First Trust Bank on Monroe Street. Tomorrow, at noon. Do you hear me? Scarlett looked at Noah. His dark eyes were absolute zero. I hear you, Brendan, she said, her voice eerily steady. Where have you been? We were starving. I don't have time for a guilt trip, Brendan snapped, his true, selfish nature bleeding through. Just bring the coat. I've got 50 grand in a box there. We can get out of Chicago, start over. Just don't let anyone see you. Especially not the Italians. He hung up. He's desperate, Noah murmured, crossing the room to take the phone from her trembling hand. He tossed it into the fireplace, watching the plastic melt and curl in the dying embers. He knows Volkov's men are closing in. He needs the money to run, and the drive to buy his life. He's gonna get neither. The next day, downtown Chicago was a frozen, chaotic gridlock. First Trust Bank was an imposing structure of limestone and bulletproof glass. Inside, it was a cathedral of silent wealth. Scarlett walked through the revolving doors at precisely noon, clutching a replica of Leo's coat. Beneath her heavy wool sweater, a discreet wire transmitted every sound to the armored surveillance van parked in the alleyway. She was led down to the subterranean vault by a polite clerk, who left her alone in a private viewing room constructed of steel and mirrored glass. A minute later, the heavy door clicked open. Brendan Cole slipped inside. Scarlett barely recognized her ex-husband. The charismatic, smooth-talking bookie was gone. In his place was a twitchy, emaciated ghost with bruised eyes and a greasy, unkempt beard. He smelled of stale sweat and cheap whiskey. You brought it, Brendan exhaled, lunging forward to grab the coat from her hands. He didn't ask about Leo. He didn't ask how she had survived the winter. He just clawed at the lining of the toddler's jacket like a starving animal. There's nothing in there, Brendan, Scarlett said, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. Brendan froze, his hands deep in the torn fabric. He looked up, his bloodshot eyes wide, with manic realization. Where is it? Where's the drive? Scarlett, if you lost it, I'm a dead man. You put a Russian mob target on our 5-year-old son, Scarlett hissed, taking a step toward him, the rage of a mother entirely eclipsing her fear. You sewed a death warrant into his clothes. What kind of a monster does that? I had no choice, he screamed, slamming his fist onto the metal table. It was the only way to get it past Noah's men. I needed leverage. Give me the safety deposit key, Scarlett. Now! You're right about one thing, Brendan. A smooth, lethal baritone echoed through the small room. Brendan spun around, all the blood draining from his face. The mirrored glass partition at the back of the viewing room silently slid open. Noah Moretti stepped out the shadows. He was dressed in an impeccable black suit, looking every inch the king of the Chicago underworld. Behind him stood Carmine, a suppressed pistol already drawn and resting casually against his thigh. "You are a dead man," Noah finished, walking slowly toward the center of the room. Brendan stumbled backward, his knees hitting the wall. "Moretti." Wait, Noah, listen to me." "I don't listen to rats," Noah interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. He pulled the brass bank key and the black USB drive from his pocket, tossing them onto the metal table with a sharp clatter. "Is this what you're looking for?" Brendan's eyes darted wildly between the drive and the door. "Take the drive, take the money in the box, just let me walk away. I swear on my life you'll never see me again." Noah let out a dark, humorless laugh. "There is no money in that box, Brendan. My accountant emptied it 3 hours ago. And this drive? I've already copied the data. I know every single route Dmitry Volkov uses to move his weapons through my city." "Then what do you want?" Brendan cried, tears of sheer terror spilling down his face. "I want to teach the city a lesson about what happens when you touch my family," Noah said smoothly. Brendan blinked, confused. "Your family?" Before Brendan could process the words, the heavy vault door swung open again. Scarlett gasped, instinctively stepping behind Noah as 3 massive men in heavy leather trench coats walked in. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Leading them was a man with cold, dead eyes and a jagged scar across his throat. Ivan Dmitry Volkov's most ruthless enforcer. The twist hit Brendan like a freight train. Noah hadn't come to kill him. Noah had used him as a peace offering. "Moretti," Ivan grunted, his heavy Russian accent filling the room. "Ivan," Noah nodded, respectfully. He gestured to the table. "The drive with your logistics, untouched. And the rat who stole it." "No!" Brendan shrieked, realizing he was being handed over to the Bratva. The Russians were famous for keeping their victims alive for weeks in soundproof basements. Brendan lunged towards Scarlett, a desperate, animalistic attempt to use her as a hostage. "Scarlett, help me." He didn't make it 2 steps. Noah moved with a brutal, blinding speed. He grabbed Brendan by the throat, slamming him face first into the reinforced steel wall. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the vault as Brendan's nose shattered. Noah leaned in, pressing his forearm against the back of Brendan's neck, pinning him mercilessly. "You don't get to say her name," Noah snarled, his composure finally breaking to reveal the sheer violence underneath. "You don't get to look at her. You are nothing but a ghost." Noah stepped back, letting Brendan slump to the floor, coughing up blood. Noah adjusted his cuffs and looked at Ivan. "Take out the trash." The Russian enforcers dragged a sobbing, pleading Brendan Cole out of the vault. His cries echoed down the marble hallway until the heavy steel doors slammed shut, sealing his fate forever. Silence descended on the room. Noah turned to Scarlett. The lethal predator vanished, replaced by the man who had built blocks with her son on a Persian rug. He reached out, his knuckles gently grazing her cheek. "It's over," Noah promised softly. "He can never hurt you or Leo again." Scarlett looked into his dark eyes, realizing the terrifying truth. She hadn't just survived the winter, she had become the queen of an empire. She leaned into his touch, her heart finally steady. "Take me home, Noah." The winter that began with a desperate plea for a pancake ended in the quiet warmth of the Lake Forest estate. Scarlett and Leo never starved again. Noah Moretti, the city's most feared predator, had found the one thing his money and power could never buy: a family. Sometimes, the darkest shadows provide the safest cover, and the most broken promises pave the way for a fiercely guarded devotion.